So, good morning to all of our attendees. You're here with us today with Rick and Tom from Kinore. First of all, I'll introduce Kinore. We're a firm of over 80 staff specializing in offering compliance and business support services, outsourced bookkeeping, payroll, management accounts, and digitalization projects. We're a multi-award winning online accountancy and company secretarial firm supporting SMEs across Ireland, Northern Ireland, and the UK. So this morning's expert guests are Rick Williams, CTO at Kinore, and Tom Francis, Head of Accounting at Kinore. So these two are going to take you through finance and tech alignment, how to make better, sorry, making data work for better decisions. So it's going to be a really insightful session with Tom and Rick bouncing off each other. It is important to note that this webinar is for general information purposes only. For specific advice, we always recommend reaching out directly to an expert. We'll share Tom and Rick's details, or indeed Kinore's details, at the end of the webinar. There is a question and answer feature and a chat feature. I'll be here in the background and we'll pose your questions on your behalf to Rick and Tom. So over to you, gentlemen.
Is Rick there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay,
Okay,
cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, Christina, for
you're
that
welcome.
lovely introduction. I'm just thinking with your tech issue, we have Rick here who could potentially fix that for you, but maybe after the webinar, Rick.
Yeah,
I
right after.
I think it's internet rather than tech. Yeah, sorry. So the joys of being based in rural Donegal when they do any work, internet
Yeah,
drops. Yeah.
indeed, indeed. Um, I suppose just to kick things off, the session today is really it's part of it's a short series we're running, and probably based on what we see kind of day to day, week to week in everything we do. So as Christina said, like the topic, finance and tech alignment, like why it's so critical. So what things we'll cover this morning, we look at the systems and how they're connected or probably not connected, which can slow decision making. We talk a little bit about the manual processes that could drain capacity, block growth, and I suppose the big one then is the poor tech decisions that you make now that can create the long term financial drag. And hopefully by the end, then you'll see why you know leaders don't necessarily need more tools, just probably the clearer plan. Rick, I'll just bounce over to you then, and hopefully that's the direction you're happy to travel in this morning.
Yeah, yeah. Listen, the first thing, the first thing I recommend everybody do, if they're looking to, integrate a bunch of systems, is really start with documentation. So, right off the bat, I'll just do a quick demo with everybody. Um, this webinar is part of a series. I did this demo before. Let me see if I can share my screen here. Um, let's see. Okay. So, yeah, the last time we were talking, Tom, there was a need for, a client example. They were trying to connect Zero with HubSpot, right? And I think the first kind of valuable piece of information I can relay to everybody is just to document your systems or leverage AI these days to help with that documentation effort. It's one of those things where you can't automate what isn't written down. So that's the first kind of pro tip I'll leave with everybody. You have to get what's out of your head or out of your key stakeholders' heads, and you got to get that written down. That really helps you find pain points. That helps you understand where you can link different systems together. Um, but what I'm showing here is so I'm logged into Grok here, and what I asked it to do is just give me a mermaid diagram. So mermaid's this new, it's basically taken over for Visio these days, but it's a syntax that lets you quickly create charts, and LLMs support this natively these days. Um, just to be fair. I actually had, and I showed this particular diagram on the last time we did this webinar, but just to be fair, I went to a new LLM, which is Claude, and I gave it more or less the same prompts. Generate a data flow diagram connecting Zero to HubSpot and Mermaid. Show the entities involved in any data translations needed. And you can see it generated more or less the same thing. And you're probably wondering, okay, what does this have to do with like my overall need to integrating two systems? In this particular example, we're only talking about two systems, but what if we were talking
Mm.
about,
Multiple. Yeah.
multiple? Yeah. So you've got
Yeah.
your finance system, you have maybe an ERP
Yeah.
and CRM and um, your practice management or your timekeeping system, and all these kind of need to talk to each other. That's
Yeah.
where, if you're not familiar, you maybe want to lean on, get this diagrammed, and it'll help you kind of see your overall application landscape. And you can start to see like, oh, there's some quick wins here if we can integrate maybe these two or three systems and phase it out and maybe do these other two systems, integrate them later or
Yeah.
um, yeah. So I think this is Tom, this is the kind of the first step for anybody looking to integrate like one or more
Yeah.
systems with for optimization.
No, that's fair. And I think, like, you said we ran this session a number of months ago. And actually, interestingly, since we had that session, I had a couple of instances where I had clients come to us with a pain point where systems weren't actually talking to each other. It was, an example of one would be where Shopify wasn't speaking to
Mhm.
Zero software. Um, and I suppose, they could see the impact that was, you start pulling manual reports, manual downloads, but the non-live, I suppose, connection means, reporting often then becomes, inaccurate because it's not real time. And therefore, when you're building, your forecast, they become unreliable as well. So what happened in that case was, what we did was we researched the options, in terms of, like as you said yourself, like you can go onto, Claude or one of those software, and what's great is that they, in your case, they give similar results, which is brilliant. We tried a couple of options actually in that case, but we could finally come up with one that worked for the client in terms of, the output. The output was really important in terms of what the customer saw on the other side in terms of the invoice as well. But what's actually great now is it's actually removed the manual interaction at all. So from ourselves having to download and upload invoice, and like that's where the errors can happen as well. So now there's real time reporting, future forecasting is more reliable, and ultimately then, better decisions can be made on the backside of that. So, and quite often it's a case, Rick, I think that you don't necessarily have a data problem. It is more often like an integration problem. So and that's until that's solved, like you probably always reacting slightly too late instead of leading the charge with confidence.
Well, yeah, the two kind of play off each other. So
Mm,
if you have a an integration problem, meaning your employees are if you have two systems that are completely separate and those two systems need to be synced, that means that you have employees that are copying and pasting information from one system to the other, back and forth bidirectionally, right? And then
yeah.
humans copying things isn't perfect, so you're going to have data quality issues that come up in one or more systems, right? Because they're just copying and pasting, or even worse, just manually, printing things out and manually retyping, right? That leads into data quality issues with the one or more systems, right? Because anytime you have someone manually doing something, that's gonna cause a problem.
And Rick, it would be fair to say, that's a really good point. I think, like the manual processes, then, like the real cost isn't often just the hours lost actually doing the manual process. It could be the strategic work that never gets done because your team is stuck in the kind of that admin mode. You're getting the report done, but you're not interpreting it or acting on it, for example.
And it is like I said, it's clean. At some point, you will have to clean up those data quality issues. Maybe maybe they're copying CRM data, right? And they are accidentally creating like duplicate clients in the CRM. That's going to create a mess for any integrations that you write later, because you'll have to go back and decide like which was the right client record, right? Or which one
Yeah,
has the most up to date information. And yeah, it's not just about like copying and pasting and losing productivity time, although that's a big chunk of it. It's more of a um, a business risk, you
yeah.
have to get ahead of.
Oh, for sure. And I always remember there was one client we worked with, they had their finance team spending, days reconciling invoices and bank accounts manually. And in the accounting world, that ship has kind of sailed now. And for them, we were able to introduce a software solution for them, so they didn't have to manually input, those invoices, and set up those live bank feeds. And overnight, then the data entry time, it really dropped dramatically overall. And something I was told, as part of, lean projects over the years is, where there are manual elements to a process, either automate or eliminate, like, where there's non-value add, so like where they're not adding value to the business or to the end customer, just automate them or eliminate them, I suppose, essentially.
Yeah. Well, what I found in my career doing, software integrations and being on the tech side is to be honest with you, like I think a lot of the quick wins are usually there's three pillars to any kind of change like this. There's people, process, and technology, right? What I found is that you can make the quickest wins just by modifying the process, or like you kind of
Yeah,
alluded to, like given us, a 10-step process, examining those 10 steps, do we need to perform each of these 10 steps? Because usually the answer, well, not, I shouldn't say usually, but there's what's happened is someone maybe made a mistake on something. So like there's a little bit of a snowball effect to any long-standing business process, and people put in checks like, oh, Tom, before you submit this, you should check this and you should check that, and that becomes a step and that becomes a step, and then it adds bloat to your overall business process, right?
yeah,
So like I'm a huge fan of just returning the judgment back to the human being and saying like, okay, remove any excessive checks that we have on our business process. Like let them use their human judgment. Um and yeah, like usually you can make a lot of quick wins with just cutting steps or rejiggering how the sequence of events,
yeah. And that's it. And I think probably that's the key point as well. I feel is, you don't scale by necessarily adding more people to a broken process. As you said, like, the easiest wins sometimes are made by fixing the process and then, I suppose, going out to figure out what you need thereafter.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Um, especially there's a adding the way I've always viewed that is throwing additional bodies at the problem. Not only does that hurt your margin, but
yeah,
um, it also kind of just like adds an order of magnitude to underlying business process issue, right? Because like you're not solving the root problem. You're just adding additional. Um, you're more or less just magnifying the problem with additional losses to margin. So
yeah, indeed. Yeah, I think definitely the best teams, I certainly see, are spending time, their time analyzing, advising, adding value, not processing the data. So I think that does feed through the whole thing. If there's anybody's any questions or would like to make any comments, please do so as well. The chats are there for any feedback there. Rick, I suppose what we might just do then is jump into the next, probably our last section is just, around those tech decisions, because businesses, often buy tools to solve the problem of today, without thinking about next year. And it's just done kind of almost subconsciously, like it's the short term, maybe the cheaper software can lead to, often lead to those expensive fixes and rebuilds or migrations later. Is that something you've seen?
like yeah. It's not it's very pervasive and it's very common actually. So like you can kind of you can be led astray by um a sales pitch that looks, wow, that's amazing. That's going to solve all of our business problems, Tom, if we just buy this piece of software and it's a SaaS product and we put all our information in the cloud and it's really going to automate this and that. It looks great. And you get in at an introductory price, and then 2 years later, what you find is that like your price or your licensing costs for that, have ballooned to like twice as much as they were when you started. And there's also a it's not easy to leave that piece of software either. So like you can't really egress your data over, out of that SaaS platform because it's their database. So I've definitely seen a lot of nightmare scenarios where people and companies are kind of locked into solutions that made sense at the time, but
Yeah,
they didn't have a roadmap, so they didn't know that, yeah, that piece of software made sense at that current time. But had they had the, 3 to 5 year roadmap, they could see like, oh wait, it's actually more strategic if we get this other solution, because our business requirements are definitely going to change in 3 to 5 years.
yeah, for sure. And I've seen that myself. Like you see it on the tech side. I've certainly seen it on the finance side, where that misaligned technology impacts so much. From cash flows, reporting accuracy. Even the budgets.
Well, they have
Such a risk.
limits. They have
Mm,
limits. Like you probably see that all the time. There is a time and a place for even just financial systems. Like there's a time and a place for different solutions. You look at and you can and what's good about at least the two or three that I have in my head, they do have really good documentation on their site. So I'll call it Zero. Zero has really good documentation on their site, and they say in black and white, like, look, here's our ideal transaction volume. Here's our in terms of which they measure in a month. So like if you're going to exceed that transaction volume, then what I like about Zero is they're transparent about like what their what their capabilities are. They're not trying to um they're not trying to sell you something that they can't do, like it's so I will call them out explicitly because it's something good that they do. Like they tell you, Tom,
yeah,
don't go with us if your transaction volume exceeds. I think I'm not going to say the right number because I don't have it off the top of my head, but all that's there if you want to look into that.
yeah. And I think you made a really good point there also, like, in relation to what you call the data roadmap. I think that was really good because it's something, somebody setting up in business necessarily wouldn't be, the primary focus could be, focusing on the business, the plan for the business, getting customers, getting revenue and servicing that revenue. But in terms of that roadmap, like for somebody who hasn't done that before, like what would be the best way to turn? Like would you go on to Claude, or would you speak to someone? What would you think?
It- I keep so someone that's joined this webinar, I don't necessarily know if they're a startup and relatively immature, or I'm gonna assume they're kind of in the middle, right? So
Yeah.
SME, medium maturity. So I'll target those folks that are on the call, and I'll say start with at least bouncing your ideas off with Claude. Now, Claude gives people a lot of what's the word I'm looking for here, Tom? Like it gives people a lot of maybe inflated sense of um, self-confidence. So if that AI still isn't at the point yet
Yeah.
where I would trust it to make critical business decisions.
You
Let's
should be skeptical a little bit of it, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, be
Yeah,
skeptical,
yeah,
but there
yeah,
I mean there are resources out there. There's plenty of, my career is in software architecture. So again, like there are plenty of us out there. If you want to run something by, a software architect, I would definitely there's a lot of consulting services out there. Kinore, we're happy to look at either build a roadmap with you or review, or validate your roadmap. So that's something we're capable of doing. But yeah, I just Claude isn't quite, or any of them are, any of the AIs aren't quite there yet where I would trust them with a critical business decision. Let's put it that way.
yeah. That's fair. And I think probably like when you're looking at roadmaps are looking ahead anyway. Like if you buy a software today, like it probably needs to be fit for the next what Rick 3 to 5 years. Would you look beyond that?
I always advise clients like 3 to 5 years, and if you're doing a vendor selection, I wouldn't try to boil the ocean and do, more than,
Yeah,
assess more than five at a time, I think.
yeah,
But yeah, again, everything starts with just articulating your business. You need to articulate your business requirements, kind of think in the sense of current state. And then for future state, you need to have a solid understanding of what your goals are. If you have those two things very solid, all you need to do is construct a bridge. How do I get from point A to point B? And that's what your roadmap is. And that's where I think some professional advice or um some professional advice is ideal, I think.
yeah, indeed. And it's just something that struck me then as you were speaking this morning. Going back to those processes. That's something that even for ourselves here at Kinore, something we had to work on is refining the processes. Like over the years, we've our processes have actually got heavy. You mentioned that earlier, but that can happen. It definitely happened to ourselves where there's extra steps put in just to because of something that happened or whatever. So I suppose it's good as well, like to review those processes every couple of years at least. I would say just to make sure that they still speak to what's required because a lot of the team will follow the process because that's the right thing to do. But if the process needs tweaking as well, I suppose sometimes you have to put your head up for some air and just see that as well. So that there's I suppose there's kind of a few different angles, but yeah, all kind of rowing the same way. So I suppose to recap and wrap up before we go to any questions that might be there. So we talked about systems being connected or not. Disconnected systems are dangerous because of the hidden cost and the slower decision making. We talked about, the manual processes which effectively drain capacity. So you could have, highly qualified people doing manual processes, which is effectively blocking your capacity and therefore for growth. Um, probably blocks your profitability as well. And then finally, those poor tech decisions that can effectively create the medium to long term financial drag. So there's a lot in there really that we covered in a short time, but I suppose as I said, Rick, we're just touching on it because we'd see a lot of what other businesses would experience on the ground. So Christina, I'm not sure if there's much in terms of Q&A there. Has anybody any questions they'd like to ask? No. Oh, looks quiet there. So no, there's no open questions anyway, no open chat. Rick, maybe just to defer over to yourself then. So just in terms of the final word on this then, like in terms of, your advice for anyone listening here then, just final word to Rick.
Final advice, l- leverage AI where you can. Validate it though by a professional. And that's true of anything. Not just talking about technology solutions. I'm talking about accounting advice, I'm talking about legal
Yeah,
advice, love advice, whatever. Like all those things. Like don't trust the LLM.
leverage.
AI is not there yet. Um, um, and Yeah, it really starts with documentation. So the and this is true of Kinore, like Tom wants something built. First thing I'm going to ask him to do, and he knows this, that's why he's smiling, is like, hey, can you write down what you want from me? Like, because I need it written down. You can't automate something that's written down. I think that's the key theme for
Yeah.
um, today is like you have to write it down. If you can get it written down, half of the battle is already done, and the rest is just you hand off to some engineer to make it happen. But I think that would be the key takeaway for today.
Thank you, Rick, for that. And thank you, everybody, for your time this morning. If you have any questions by follow-up, you can contact the team. We'd be more than happy to help. And if you think of any questions later, equally contact the team. So look, thank you, Rick, for joining, and thanks for your
Thank
input.
you.
Really appreciate that. So have a good day, everybody. Take care now.
Bye, Tom. See
Bye-bye.
you later.
Bye-bye.